A mortise and tenon joint is a staple of quality woodworking. If you want to make durable furniture that will last for generations, you need to know how to create this joint. We've already made videos about cutting mortises with routers and with Forstner bits. We've also made tutorials about cutting tenons. I'll link to some of those below this video. Today we'll talk about mortising by hand, a skill that even power tool woodworkers should know. Because with a little practice, you'll find that if you only have one or two to cut, it's faster and easier to mortise by hand than it is to set up a router jig for just a couple mortises. And it's at least as fast as a Forstner bit and chisel method. Besides, it's strangely satisfying. But first we have to talk about chisels. This is a regular, everyday, beveled bench chisel. It's great for paring and for light chopping, but it's not the best tool for heavy chopping because it's relatively thin and the bevel is usually ground to about 25 or 30 degrees. That's great for most tasks, but it's not durable enough for heavy chopping and hardwood. I'm not saying you can't chop a mortise with a beveled edge chisel. You can regrind the bevel to a steeper angle and it'll get the job done, but it's not really what this type of chisel is designed for. This is called a firmer chisel. These are heavy-duty chisels with thicker blades. The edges are square because they aren't meant to get into the corners of dovetails. They're meant to chop wood. As such, the cutting bevels are ground to about 30 or 35 degrees. These particular chisels feature hornbeam handles, which are extremely hard and they'll hold up to a lot of pounding. Firmer chisels are certainly durable enough to chop mortises as well as a lot of other woodworking tasks, but they still aren't my first choice. This is a traditional mortising chisel. It has one job, to chop mortises. Hardwoods, softwoods, you don't have to drill out most of the waste ahead of time. A mortising chisel can chop a square hole in a board with pure power and through some clever design features. First, it's durable. The blade is a thick bar of hardened steel. The handles are hornbeam, but they're also capped with a ring to prevent mushrooming under the blows of a mallet over time. The bevels are really steep, usually ground to about 35 degrees, so they can hold up to heavy chopping in hardwood. But what really makes a traditional mortising chisel work well are the wide, flat sides. These give you a reference surface to help keep your mortise straight as you work. You'll see what I mean as I demonstrate how to chop a mortise. First, we have to secure the workpiece. Softwood can be clamped in a vise, but hardwood will slip through its jaws, so it's better to secure it to a bench top. Now, we must lay out the mortise. The width of your mortise is determined by the width of the chisel you intend to use. If you only have a 1/2-inch mortising chisel, guess how wide all your mortises will be. The best way to do this is to use a mortising gauge. This features 2 adjustable cutters. Set the gauge to the width of your chisel and then use it to mark the sides of your mortise on your workpiece. You may choose to center your mortise perfectly, but I just eyeball it. I do make sure that I run the fence of my gauge on the outer face of my workpiece. Then when I use this same gauge setting to lay out the tenon on the end of that workpiece, I do the same thing, running the fence on the outer face, and that way everything will line up. I use a square to mark the 2 ends of the mortise and I'm ready to chop. But before I do, we have to lay out some ground rules. First, stay about 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch away from the 2 ends of your mortises until the very end. You'll see why shortly. Also, you want to keep the chisel from tipping to the right or to the left so the sides of your mortise will go straight down into the wood. You can tip it forward and back. In fact, you'll do that intentionally as you chop, but not side to side. So you want to stand behind the chisel so you can sight down the sides as you work. Finally, the depth of the mortise is not an exact science. It's better to be a little too deep than a little too shallow. In fact, I like to add an extra 1/8 inch or so to my depth, and then I mark it on my chisel with a piece of tape. The first cut is made with the back of the chisel toward you and the bevel facing away from your body. Start about 3/16 of an inch away from the end of the mortise and give the chisel a whack with the mallet. Notice that as the chisel cut down into the wood, the bevel forced it back toward you a little bit. That's why we didn't start right on the end of our mortise. Now move the chisel about 1/8 of an inch forward and take another bite. You'll notice that the chisel went a little deeper this time, even though you didn't hit it any harder. In fact, each time you advance for another bite, the chisel will be a little bit easier to go a little bit deeper. What's happening is that as that steep bevel is forcing the chisel back towards you, it's shearing off the fibers in the hole behind it. You can even begin levering them out as you go. Keep an eye on your depth so you don't go too deeply, as it becomes easier with each bite. Another thing that's happening is the large flat sides of the chisel keep it from twisting as you drive it in. This helps you create straight, flat walls on your mortise, something that would be difficult with a thinner bench chisel. As you near the end, you have to stop short of your pencil mark. This will keep you from smashing those fibers as you lever out the chips. Instead, turn the chisel around and reposition your body or the workpiece so you can start from the other end. Because you've removed a lot of the waste in the center of the mortise, the bevel won't force the chisel backwards this time, and you should be able to pare straight down along the end line. Remember how each successive cut went a little deeper? The bottom of your mortise is sloped at this point. So work back in the opposite direction to remove the rest of the waste up to your other end line. And you're done. I spent a lot of time explaining what was happening, but the actual process was surprisingly fast. And the result is a straight mortise of consistent width and with square corners that are ready to receive a tenon. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial about mortises and the tools used to make them. Below, I'll link to the other videos I promised and to chisels that I used if you want to try hand chopping mortises yourself. See you next time. For a 100-year-old company, Narex sure has some secrets. Like, how can they make so many tools of such quality at such affordable prices? And why didn't I know about this company's rich history before? Narex is just full of surprises. Check them out at the link below this video. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.